So this afternoon I will share with you an old and a constant interest of mine in the study of gladiatorial phenomenon in Roman provinces of the Black Sea. So I entered direct in the subject, and I will start with that. The scientific literature addresses a variety of topics related to the gladiator fights and venationes and building intended to performance, as well as other aspects that characterize the gladiatorial phenomenon and its role in defining the Roman world. So, for the for the for the eastern part of the empire, there are only 5 monographic studies related to this subject, 3 of which are based on a doctoral thesis, and one is unpublished doctoral thesis. So first of the the study, it's probably, and I think after my knowledge, is the first publication who monographic publication for the Gladiators. Is the publication of Louis Robert from the 1940s, and after that, during the year, the next publication was that of Elisabeth Boulet in 2001, who was based on her PhD. She defended it in 1999, and after that it was another PhD thesis of Michael Carter in 1999, but unfortunately it's still unpublished. And in 2009, Lyudmil Vagalinsky from Bulgaria, he published his PhD thesis also. And the last one is Cristian Mann, who published his book about the gladiator in the Eastern Roman Empire in 2011. So based in this context and taking into account the fact that the study on gladiator fights in the Pontic region was completely missing from the scientific landscape, I approached this team during my doctoral studies under the coordination of Professor Alexandru Avram. And by the Pontic space and the Pontic region, we meant the provinces of Moesia Inferior, Bithynia et Pontus, and we have here Thracia, Bithynia et Pontus, and Cappadocia. This is not a perfect map, but it was better than the other I found I had access. So gladiator fights were so appreciated in the empire that become to represent a symbol of Roman power and greatness. The first recorded gladiatorial combat took place in 264 BC in the Forum Boarium from Rome on the occasion of the funeral of the consul Junius Brutus Pera. If initially had a funerary character, starting with Augustus, they transform, becoming a means of mass entertainment, and as is found in most monographic studies, of manipulation of the plebeians by the elite. In this case, it is very interesting how easily the plebs are credited by the contemporary authors to us as easily manipulated. Okay, so we said that starting with Augustus, during his time, the games were institutionalized, reorganized, and as such, they were integrated in imperial cult ritual. So far, there is no evidence to attest that the gladiator fights would have been organized on other occasion of celebration of any other cult than the imperial one. Before moving on the today presentation space, I first recall the first gladiatorial fights organized in Greek space. Thus, it is assumed that in the fall of 166 BC, after other authors in 167, but the most of the scholars, they agree with 166. The Seleucid king, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, organized fights with gladiators at Daphne during the festivities dedicated to celebration of divinity Apollo Archegetes. Those festivities, they were given either on the occasion of a victory, probably he celebrated a victory over Ptolemy VI, or the preface to his eastern campaign, probably against the Mithridates I of Persia. On which occasion, so Antiochus gave this celebration on which occasion he wished to surpass the game of Aemilius Paulus from 1 year earlier, when Paulus organized these games as a result of conquest of Macedonia after following the Battle of Pydna from 168 BC. The celebration lasts of 30 days. So the celebration organized by Antiochus lasted 30 days, consisting of shows and competitions, among which the fights of 240 pairs of gladiators and those between wild animals stood out. So the gladiators fights organized on this occasion are the first recorded outside of a funerary context and the first associated with fights between wild animals. However, the participation of gladiators during this festivity remains debatable, being rather confused by Athenaeus when he quotes Polybius. It seems that at the end of the 2nd century and the beginning of the 1st century BC, at Delos, the Italic community may have presented gladiators fights, but this hypothesis requires further debate. It is certainty that in the winter between 71 and 70 BC, the Roman general Lucius Licinius Lucullus presented gladiator fights in a triumphal context in Ephesus following his victories in Asia Minor. After this event, we no longer find the gladiatorial fights conditioned by their organization in a funerary context, but we encounter them as part of the events dedicated to the celebration of triumphs. To this end, and with the hope of emerging victorious against Octavius, Marcus Antonius led gladiators to Cyzicus in order to celebrate the triumph. After Marcus Antonius is defeated in Actium, the gladiators loyal to him set out for Egypt to join him. They crossed all Asia Minor and were stopped on their way by governor of Syria, back then Quintus Didius. In the period following after the Battle of Actium, change took place that would shape Roman society and politics for the following centuries, also reflecting on the way gladiator fights were organized. Starting with the first quarter of the 1st century AD, in Asia Minor, gladiators fights were associated with celebration dedicated to the imperial cult. And an inscription from Ancira, dated to the time of Tiberius, lists priests of the imperial cult who organized festivity in his honor. During this time, the number of events escalated to the scale of empire, but they ended up being integrated in the events organized in the Greek world by the Greek magistrate starting from the 1st century AD, as is well attested in Ancira, in Tassus, in Mylassa, in Aphrodisias, and in Magnesia. It was the time when the Greek magistrates integrated gladiators fights into the festivities dedicated to the imperial cult. The latter became a substitute of cult of Rome, which symbolized the acceptance of Roman rule by the Greek cities. This time, the celebration of the imperial cult by the Greek cities symbolized loyalty to the emperor in order to benefit from privileges from him. So, the propagation of the imperial cult contributed in a decisive manner to the promotion of gladiator fights in the Pontic provinces. These were organized by a Hiereus, a priest, or archiereus, and high priest, in the point who has the responsibility for the imperial cult as an obligatory part of the priesthood, but also as a pontarch. So we have some cases when the pontarchs, they organize this kind of events. Epigraphic documents which mention priest or high priest as organizer of fights during the exercise of their function contain the formula diopolon, so true weapons. Such inscriptions, which include formula Siereus diopolon or Archiereus diopolon, are found at Tomis in Augusta Traiana at Philippopolis and Bize. In other inscriptions, Hiereus and Archiereus are mentioned alongside the term monomachia, which is the Greek equivalent of gladiatorial fights. They were discovered in Odessus, at Nicopolis at Distrum, Serdica, Nicea, and Sinope, and Sebastopolis. However, the shows, as it seems, were not an exclusive privilege of the priest of the imperial cult. Taking into account the information from two inscriptions, the first from Nicopolis at Distrum, in which philotimia diopolon, so the Greek equivalent of an organizer, Munerarius, is mentioned, and the second from Augusta Traiana, where the organizer appear under the formula philotimon archierea diopolon, it is possible that some performances were organized with the consent of emperor or the imperial administration in the province, and by private citizen without them holding a position or any magistracy within the city of or within the province. So the shows of gladiators and hunters represented a considerable financial effort for those who organized them, being an indicator of financial power. The motivation was most of the time to obtain prestige on a local and a provincial level, and to be able to organize a philotimia, which is the Greek equivalent of munus. The priest of the imperial cult had to have a fortune greater than 400,000 sesterces, according to a decree of Tiberius. The cost needed to organize the cheapest philotimia amount to 60,000 sesterces, representing 15% of the wealth of a priest of the imperial cult or any other organizer. We have no document relating to the cost of organizing gladiatorial fights in the Roman Pontic provinces, and the inscription that do tell us about the gladiator fights do not specify any cost, but describe the events, nothing that the performance were magnificent. This led us to think that they require significant budgets. Such an event consists of a series of organizational aspects, each demanding substantial expenses and raising the cost of fights to considerable sums, being equivalent to a fortune. In order to arrange this performance, the organizer had to pass through a certain stages. So the first concern was to the acquisition of the fighters. According to Lex Italicensis, a Senatus Consultum dating from the days of Marcus Aurelius and Commodus, dated in 177 AD, regulated the cost of organizing munera in the empire in the second half of the 2nd century. So back then, in that time, the lowest contract of a gladiator for participation in a fight was between 600 and 3,000 sesterces. At the same time, the first-class gladiator who participated in a show, whose budget ranged between 30,000 and 60,000 sesterces, could not be bought with more than 5,000 sesterces. However, the price could increase to 50,000 if the show had a budget of 200,000 sesterces or more. So, no philotimia could consist only of gladiators. An equally important element in the economy of such an event was the hunting of wild animals, and of course the venaciones, as well as the fighting, as well as the fight stage between animals and the display of exotic beasts. The Edict of Diocletian from 301 decree of maximum prices attempt to curb the rampant inflation of stipulating maximum price that could be charged for a multitude of goods and services available around the empire, and set the price of animal purchased for the arena. So the first class of African lion cost a maximum 600,000 sesterces, while the first class of African lioness cost 400,000 sesterces. Ordinary lions cost between 125 to 150, and lioness between 100 and 125,000. Leopards between 75,000 and 100,000, and bears between 20 and 25,000 sesterces. Herbivore, such as ostriches, 5,000, boars 4 to 6,000, deer 2 to 3,000, and wild asses 5,000 sesterces. So this involved a high financial cost that was not possible for everyone. As a matter of fact, an unpleasant aspect of the capture of and the trade of wild animals for their display in the arena, it had led to faunal imbalances in certain geographical areas. During Emperor Augustus' time, lions in the Atlas Mountains and the panthers from the Asia Minor disappeared altogether. 4 centuries later, the hippopotami of Nubia and Mesopotamian lions, the tigers of Hircania and the elephants of North Africa disappeared completely and forever from these territories. So the price paid by organizers for purchasing wild animal for a venatio, it's hard to establish for the space we refer to, because there is no text detailing the amount paid for animals in this part of the empire. Apart from this aspect, the one who organized the event had to add to the general expenses also the charges entailed by hiring a referee and an assistant. Sometimes you have two, so you have summarudis and secundarudis. The distribution of food and prizes during the breaks between battles, it was not mandatory, but in a perfect munera, you must have it. So sometimes you have sparse domicilium, sometimes not. Setting up an amphitheater or another place to host such an event, as well as an auxiliary staff. Without them, you can have the show. Last but not least was the imperial tax for munera, which was between 25 and 33% of the amount paid for the organizing the event. As Lexit Aricens said, we don't know how it was input this tax to the organizers, who will have 25 and who will have 33%. So this is debatable. The inscription that refer, among other things, to the number of days during which gladiatorial fights took place, mention in all cases a minimum of 2 and maximum of 6 days. So we have 2 days in Nicopolis Adistrum and Serdica. We have 3 days in Claudiopolis and 6 days at Tomis. The small number of inscriptions in which the duration of the performance is mentioned, compared to the total number of inscriptions of the announcement type and those of honor in which the duration of the performance is not mentioned, make us assume that most of the gladiatorial shows were probably organized during a single day. As the origin of the gladiators attested in the Pontic provinces, where some of them end, and they came with one exception from various eastern provinces of the empire. So the origin is known in the case of 7 of them. So that's originating from We have a gladiator original from Pergam, from Thessaloniki, from another one from Syria. We don't know the city because the description is fragmentary. But we have another one who's also from Syria, but we know that he is from Apamea. We have another one from Tarsus and another one from province of Macedonia. With one exception, it's Skirtos Dakensis, Gladiator Skirtos Dakensis, whose probably origin from the province of Dacia. But it's not very sure because the scholars had a debate that he could also came from Dalmatia. So the Skirtos and another gladiator, Publius, originally from Arpinum, which is a city in central Italy. It's the city where Cicero originated. Publius, so it's original from Arpinium, and he ended up in Beroia. So together with Skirtos, there are only known cases of gladiators whose origin is not from the eastern area of the empire. The details related to the origin of the gladiators give us an interesting perspective on the mobility of the fighters, but is far from being comprehensive. So the category of gladiators encountered in the Pontic space are numerous and diverse, which implies that the fights must have been various and spectacular. We identify a number of 10 categories of gladiators in Black Sea and Pontic provinces. So we have 19 retiari. In the right, you have an example of a stela of Skirtos Dakensis. So we have 19 retiari, 10 mentioned in inscriptions, and we have discovered them in Tomis, in Nicaea, in Philippopolis, Nicea, in Philippopolis, Amasea, Claudiopolis, and 9 are representation from Tomis, Tsaraveț, Augusta Traiana, Cheramico, Livada, Philippopolis, and Tatarev. We have attested 14 secutores, 7 mentions in inscriptions. You can saw them in Tomis, in Marcianopolis, Asenograd, Nicomedia, Nicea, and Claudiopolis, and 7 representations from Tatarevo, Marcianopolis, Nicopolis, Adistrum, Augusta Traiana, and Philippopolis. Another 5 mirmilones are attested in Black Sea, in the Pontic region. So we have 4 mentioned in inscriptions and 1 representation at Ljubimets in south of Bulgaria. We have 7 provocatores, 6 mentions in inscriptions, and 1 representation at Amisus. 3 Esedari, all of them they are mentioned in an inscription from Claudiopolis. We have 11 venatores, 5 of them are.
Hello.
Okay. So, in the case of 3 gladiators, as I said, the remuneration between 750 and 3,700.
Hello? Do you hear me?
I think.
But perhaps to wait and turn off the microphone of this person.
Yeah, I think yes.
Mami,
Thibaut, can you close the mic?
Hello?
I suggest to actually take the person out of the group because it doesn't seem that it's.
Yeah,
I want to learn.
I can't do that.
I want to learn. I want to learn.
Then you should learn how to listen.
My bad, Rudy.
So, Thibaut?
Yo, man, what the hell? I know I'm funny. That's why you're laughing.
It seems to be safe now.
Okay. So we quit. So as I said, the remuneration for the free gladiators varied between 750 and 3,750 sesterces. In the case of free gladiators, under this condition, we can say that the motivation to fight in the arena was the impressive remuneration that a gladiator could earn. Thus, a free gladiator was remunerated with 25% of the value determined by the cost regarding the organization and the class of the gladiator, while the slave one had 20% of his value. As for the source of recruitment, they must have been similar to those in the rest of the empire. For example, prisoners of war, damnatio ad ludum, as we encountered in Nicea and Nicomedia. And here I think it's very interesting to read a short text from a letter sent by Pliny the Younger when it was governor of Bithynia Pontus to Trajan regarding the damnatio ad ludum and also other types of damnati. So Pliny said to Trajan, in many of these states, but especially in Comedia and Nicea, there are certain persons lying under sentence to the mines to take part in the gladiatorial show and to similar penalties, who are now acting as and performing the duties of public slaves and are even drawing an annual salary as such. When I was told of this, I hesitated for a long time as to what course I ought to adopt. For I thought it would be showing too harsh a severity to hand them over to their penalties after so many years, especially as many of them are old men and are, to all accounts, now living a decent and respectable life. Yet I thought it was scarcely the proper thing to retain criminals as public servants. So we can see that in the beginning of the 2nd century, even some person who were damnatio ad ludum, they do somehow that could elude the law and do something else. So other source of recruitment were slaves and freedmen, as Skirtos from Tomis, on whose tombstones his status of Eleuteros is mentioned. Even if Louis Robert observed that most of the gladiator epitaph give us the impression that they were free men with wives and had the money for burial and epitaph, they are most likely of servile origin. Otherwise, they will all have the adjective Eleuteros mentioned on the epitaph. In this region, we have also information on other aspects of gladiator fights, such as the role of the referee, summa and secunda ludis. One of these, we found him as being responsible for the defeat and death of the gladiator Diodorus from Amissos. So nothing changed from 2000 years ago. Now we have it in football. Another referee, it's represented in a sculpture discovered in Tatarevo. You have in the back, in the left of the screen, in Bulgaria, in which he is presented alongside with two other characters identified as Hydraulari. Those are Hydraulari, and this guy is the referee with the two gladiators, the Secutor and Retiarius. On the other hand, on the right, you have an inscription was discovered in Montana, Mesia Inferior, where the tribune of the Prima Cilicum cohort, Tiberius Claudiu Ulpian, erected an altar dedicated to the goddess Diana, dated in 147 AD, on the occasion of a successfully concluded hunt organized by the governor of the province, Claudius Saturninus. The purpose of this hunt was to capture bears and bisons for the imperial venatio. The vexillationes of Legio Prima Italica and Legio Undicem Claudia and the detachment of soldiers from the classis Flavia and Resica took part also in this hunt. Probably these animals were intended for a great ludus offered by the Emperor Antoninus Pius in the year 1 year after, in 148, on the occasion of celebration of 900 years in the founding of Rome. Another inscription from Montana tells us about two venatores immunes, Iulius Longinus and Flavius Valerius, who were part of Legio Undicem Claudia, stationed in the year 155, when the inscription is dated, at Durostoro. We don't know if those two were part of the imperial venatio from 147. We have no clue. All this together with the representation on lithic metal and ceramic supports complete the broad perspective on the organization and development of Munus in the Pontic area. Such a deployment of forces required a special space suitable for holding gladiators fights, and for the need of satisfy the requirements imposed by the organization of shows of this kind appeared the amphitheaters. So these monuments, this monumental edifice represent for several centuries one of the symbols of the Roman Empire. In the Pontic space, with a special look at the provinces on the left of the Pontus, Mesia and Thracia, our four amphitheaters have been identified, two of small size, which could provide seats for 1 to 5,000 people, 1,000 to 5,000 people, and two of medium size, calculated to receive approximately 20,000 people. In Mesia Inferior, the amphitheater discovered at Tomis was medium size, and the one identified at Marcianopolis was rather small. Two other amphitheaters are known in Thracia, of which the one discovered in Serdica is considered medium size, and the one from Diocletianopolis is small. Of all edifices, the amphitheater at Tomis requires, in our opinion, more attention, since Tomis, the only city of Greek tradition in the Pontic area in Asia Minor, where there is an amphitheater and not a theater modified to hold gladiatorial shows. Instead, in large cities in Asia Minor, such Nicaea, Ephesus, or Aphrodisias, there seems to be resistance to the construction of such an edifice. The reason can be various. One is that of the manifestation of an apparent opposition of the adaptation of a Roman symbol in the East, but rather it's a romantic explanation. Of course, a more serious one and practical reason is the fact that the edifices already built were sufficient for organized such activities. As for the theaters that were modified to provide the necessary space for shows, the example discovered in the Pontic provinces are reduced to a single edifice, of this kind, that that of Philippopolis, designed to receive a number of between 3,500 to 4,000 spectators. Unlike these two types of certain edifice intended to support gladiatorial shows, amphitheaters and theaters, the number of buildings associated with this event is much higher. So in Measure Inferior, it is assumed, according to some geomagnetic research, that there are amphitheaters still unattested archaeologically at Nove and Nicopolis Adisum. In Tracia at Augusta Traiana, it's a large space with tribune in which a lot of objects related to gladiatorial fights were discovered, which is why it was proposed as a potential place for gladiatorial fights. At the Ultum, Vagaliski claimed that an amphitheater was identified with the help of geomagnetic method and aerial photographs. In the province of Bithynia at Pontus, there is no attested amphitheater, but only theaters at Nicaea, Nicea, at Prusias, at Hippium, Martius, Amastris, and Pompeiopolis, for which we do not have a certainty that they would have been modified for the purpose of this kind of shows. Although in Nicea, where gladiatorial fights are attested, there must have been a venue of them. Also, we have another 3 theater attested in Cappadocia, but without any indication of their modification at Comana Pontica, Sebastopolis, and Zela. And in Sebastopolis is the same situation as in Nicea. So gladiators fights are attested, but we are not for sure if the theater is modified to sustain this kind of events. The spread of gladiator fights in the Pontic provinces is closely related to the celebration of the imperial cult and the Roman military presence. In contrast to the Greek Oriental space, where gladiators fights seems to be attested from the 2nd century BC, in the Pontic space, they enter only in the first half of the 2nd century AD, based on archaeological discoveries, or perhaps even earlier in the second half of the 1st century AD, based on the text of Pliny the Younger, letter to the Emperor Trajan. Pliny the Younger was the governor in 110 for Bithynia, but he discussed about people, the condemned who are old enough, and probably this tradition of condemned damnatio ad ludum or ad metalla, it's older than his governance of Bithynia. So would say that probably we can discuss about the second half of the 1st century AD as attested that as a source of gladiators for the display. Analyzing the inscription dedicated to the organizers and the gladiators in the Pontic provinces, we notice that they are generally dated between the 2nd and the 3rd century AD. It is not known within certainty the reason why this manifestation entered in Pontic space so late, but we can assume that this is due to the political and social stability as a result of the Roman rule, leading to the economic growth of the entire area. Comparing the dates of the inscriptions with the chronology resulting from the archaeological research of the amphitheaters, we notice that the only edifice intended to host gladiator fights built and operated during the 2nd and 3rd century is the one from Tomis. The amphitheater from Marcianopolis, Diocletianopolis, and Serdica were built at the end of the 3rd century and the beginning of the 4th century AD, and their initial functionality ceased in the second half of the 4th century AD. What is really curious is that beginning in the second, or starting with the second half of the 3rd century, we no longer find any inscription referring to gladiator fights. This situation is in contradiction with the problem imposed by the amphitheaters, the construction of which is intensifying exactly in this period. So gladiator fights certainly continued to be organized until the middle of the 4th century AD, when they ceased under the pressure of the Christians. And an argument to support this theory is the location of some basilicas above buildings, such those built in the amphitheater of Tomis and Marcianopolis. And here we have the amphitheater of Tomis with a basilica on top of it. So we don't know if here if Christians were sacrificed here in the arena, or if it's or if the construction of basilicas over the amphitheaters become a tradition at that time for the sacralization of this kind of space. So the gladiators who fought in these provinces were no less than those in the Western Empire. The categories they belonged were among the most diverse, some of them even rare. They were financially motivated, and moreover, society's perception of them was different from that of Western society. Perhaps most importantly, unlike their brothers in arms in the West, here the life expectancy is much lower because the fight ended when the opponent was killed. An easy phenomenon to observe is that of the supremacy of the cities of Greek tradition in the organization and development of the munera by comparison with the cities founded by the Romans at the time of the conquest of these territories. This fact could only be attributed to the economic capacity of the Greek cities that were based on intense trade and richer cultural heritage. And to close in a romantic manner, we can say that the gladiator fights represented more than the celebration of the emperor and his family and the entire ruling class of Rome, down to the last citizen. So these were symbols of extraordinary power of Rome and its universal supremacy. The fact that so much human and financially energy was expended in staging such an event, that the life and death decision were made so easily about the fighters in the arena, and the frequent exposure of such dangers, and the sacrifice in the arena of some of the rarest and the most exotic wild animals, it's only proof to every citizen, so in the eye of every citizen, from every corner of the empire, that the emperor, the Rome, and the empire are universal and omnipotent entities. And most important, he was part of this gear. So gladiators and the fights provided an opportunity for the whole society to gather and celebrate together in the same space. So thank you for your attention.